Today's book that I'm reading is Cost Reduction and Optimization for Manufacturing and Industrial Companies. We're going to start here on page number 28. 3. Developing and implementing time standards. Time standards define how long tasks should take. Time standards can be applied to both direct labor and overhead functions. Time standards should be developed using a blended approach of engineering estimates, historical performance, and actual observations. Time standards should be adjusted when they are found to be inaccurate. The organization should measure performance against the time standards and implement improvements where standards are not met. The time standards will reveal costly tasks, and the organization can use this information for targeting cost reductions. Time standards may be resisted for a variety of reasons, but the reasons are all invalid. Key questions. Do we have time standards? How accurate are the time standards? How are the time standards communicated to the people doing the work? Do we compare actual performance to the time standards? What do we do when we don't meet the time standards? The Time Standards Development Roadmap. A time standard defines how long a task should take. In the manufacturing world, time standards are stated for such things as machining a part, assembling a collection of parts, preparing parts for painting parts, and so on. Time standards are prepared using techniques to be discussed later in this chapter. Many organizations do not have standards for the work they do. Many organizations have inaccurate standards, and many organizations do not communicate standard information to the people doing the work. This chapter simplifies how to define, implement, and use accurate standards to reduce costs. If no time standards exist, or if they exist but are not being used, the organization's efficiency is not being tracked, managed, or optimized. When this occurs, the organization is missing a significant cost reduction opportunity. The reason for this is that there is a significant difference between telling someone to do something versus telling someone to do something and telling them how long the task should take. In the first case, the company has little control over labor costs. The job takes however long the operator takes to do it. In the second case, management is stating an expectation by defining how much time is budgeted for performing specific operations. When this is clearly communicated and measured, the actual time required tends to be much closer to the time standard. Where time standards are not used, actual performance varies widely. Developing and using time standards is important for many reasons. Time standards clearly communicate management expectations to workers. The organization can accurately estimate labor costs when preparing bids. Figure 3-1, Recommended Time Standard Development Approach. 1. Identify processes for time standard development. 2. Identify tasks. Prepare engineered estimates. Observe work. Simulate work. Review historical data. Define standard. Repeat for other tasks. Repeat for other processes. The organization can assess its efficiency overall at the work center level and at the operator level. The organization can determine if efficiency is improving or deteriorating. The organization can identify and target high return efficiency improvement opportunities. These considerations are critical in reducing manufacturing costs in any organization, especially those that are labor intensive. Time standard development. Most organizations develop time standards using one or more of the following approaches. Engineered estimates that are based on examination and analysis of the drawings, equipment, and processes used for making components, sub-assemblies, and assemblies. This is similar to the example used in the preceding chapter for estimating the headcount required in a single work center for assembling a 6-component mechanism. If the part or assembly has been produced in the past, the organization can use historical performance to identify the time required. Excuse me. If the part or assembly is in production, the organization can observe the process and base time standards on actual performance. If the part or assembly has never been produced, the organization can simulate the process and base time standards on the simulation. Each approach has advantages and disadvantages. Engineered standards are strongly influenced by the estimator's competence. Standards are based on historical or current performance, are strongly influenced by past or current performance. If past or current performance has been inefficient, the inefficiency will be carried forward by the new time standard. Time standards based on simulations may not incorporate cost reductions due to learning curve or other efficiency improvements. The best approach is to use the blend of the approaches and to temper the results with a healthy dose of common sense. These common sense assessments include the following. If your organization is using an engineered standards approach, it should compare the engineered time standards to historical or current performance. If there's a difference, either the standards or the performance need to be adjusted to bring reality and the standards into agreement. If your organization uses historical data to develop time standards, it needs to assess its performance if its performance is competitive. If it is not, both the actual performance and the standards need to be modified. Where the standards indicate high labor content, the organization should examine these operations to seek ways to reduce the labor. Much of the remainder of this book will be devoted to accomplishing this. The bottom line to all of this will be to set a time standards for the organization's tasks, with each standard expressed in minutes or fractions of an hour for each operation. As mentioned earlier, this need not be restricted to manufacturing activities, although in organizations that have standards, it usually is. The concept of developing standards and measuring performance against the standards can also be applied to overhead functions. If the organization already has time standards, the question to consider is, who prepared the time standards and how good are they? In some organizations, industrial and manufacturing engineers prepare the time standards. In others, manufacturing supervisors do. In yet others, other people in the organization do. In assessing time standard adequacy, we recommend considering the following. If the time standards are more than a few years old, it is likely that they are outdated. Even if they still reflect current operations, older standards will not reflect expected learning curve improvements. We'll describe this in a later chapter. If engineers develop the time standards, how well do they know the process? Are the engineers frequently in the shop, or do they do all of their work from the office? Not being intimately familiar with the manufacturing operation is a serious issue in many organizations. Don't accept the standards as accurate simply because they were prepared by engineers. If the manufacturing supervisors develop time standards, there may be a natural tendency to inflate standards so that they will be easy to meet. Do the people who do the work agree with the standards? If standards exist but you suspect that they are inaccurate, they should be corrected using the blend of technologies suggested earlier. There is an argument that standards should never be adjusted once released, as this will make efficiency measurement and tracking meaningless. That's a hollow argument because standards are used in too many places, most notably bidding new work, to allow the continued existence of inaccurate standards. Standards should be adjusted as the operation improves, and management has a responsibility to improve the organization on a continuous basis. If your organization does not have time standards or the standards have fallen into disuse, you've uncovered a great opportunity. It's almost a certainty that cost reduction opportunities exist and that implementing time standards will aid in acting on these opportunities. If either of these situations exists in your organization, implementing accurate time standards will focus the cost reduction effort. A suggested approach for implementing accurate time standards includes the following. Target specific areas in which you wish to implement time standards initially, with others to follow. You won't be able to do the entire factory immediately. Select the people who will develop the time standards. If you don't have time standards, your organization may not have industrial or manufacturing engineers. You will have manufacturing supervisors, and they can develop the standards. You may also wish to consider retaining outside assistance for this task. Define an approach for developing the time standards. Targeting processes in a sequential and logical manner. meet to review progress on a weekly basis. In this plan, you should recognize that developing time standards for the entire manufacturing facility is not an overnight activity. It is instead a long-term effort. It is achievable, though, if the standards development activity is approached in a reasonable manner. Footnote 1. Some organizations use the standards adjusted by efficiency when bidding new work, which is another good approach. If the standard is known to be incorrect, however, it should be adjusted. Footnote 2. There are consultants who specialize in this area. This is also a great project to take to a local university with manufacturing or industrial engineering department. Students can be employed at low cost, typically with the guidance and blessing of their professors, to develop time standards. Using time standards to reduce cost. Time standards should be used to target cost reduction. 5 steps are involved. Management or the cost reduction team should identify where the costs are greatest and focus on reducing the labor content in those areas. Management should clearly communicate the standards to the manufacturing organization. This lets everyone know what the expectation is. Approaches for doing so include specifying the time standard in the work instructions, posting the standards in the work center, and communicating the information verbally. In our experience, the latter two approaches work best. Not everyone reads work instructions. Simply letting most people know how long they have to complete a task is effective in bringing the actual time into consonance with the time standard. The organization needs a tool for identifying the actual time taken to perform tasks. There are multiple approaches for doing so, ranging from the sophisticated to the simple. Systems are available that use barcoded entries on printed work orders. For example, to allow operators to scan in the start and completion of each task, and then the computer calculates the task duration so that it can be compared to the standards. The work center can simply count the number of jobs an operator completes during the day, divide that into the hours worked, and use the quotient to define the actual time required per job. The organization can require the operator to note the start and finish times for each job. In organizations that are initiating a time standard system, the latter two approaches are more likely to be used. Whether the organization opts for sophistication or simplicity is somewhat irrelevant. The important thing is to state the time standard, communicate it to the people doing the work, and then collect actual times to assess performance against standard. Once actual times have been collected, the organization can use these times to compare actual times to standards to assess performance. This is used for evaluating efficiency, which is discussed in the next chapter. Where significant differences exist between time standards and the actual time required to do the job, the organization should investigate why. It may be that the time standard is inaccurate. It may be that the operator or department is inefficient, or it may be that a combination of both conditions exists. In order for this approach to be meaningful, the organization should review overall performance against standards at a senior level on a monthly basis, with the data summarized along product and departmental lines. Individual manufacturing groups may wish to review the data more frequently, and they will probably want to do it at the operator level. Who should do this work? The team charged with developing the time standards should be the same as the cost reduction team. This is a specialized task and a separate team should address it. As mentioned earlier, the members should include industrial or manufacturing engineers if the organization has them, the manufacturing supervisor from each area, and an independent review authority to make sure the time standards are reasonable, perhaps an engineer or someone from the finance department. Alternatively, the organization can seek outside support to assist in this area. Risks. You will almost certainly encounter resistance when attempting to implement standards or drive the organization to improve the accuracy of and use of existing standards. There are many potential sources and reasons. Resistance may come from manufacturing management. The manufacturing managers and supervisors may object based on the cost and effort involved in creating a standards program. If the organization has a bargaining unit, a union, it may object. Others may object based on fear of being measured or being held accountable for poor performance. Still others may object based on a fear that inaccurate standards will be used to punish adequate performance, or that differences in individual performance make the time standards meaningless. Sometimes salespeople object because standards objectively define costs and lead times, and using standards prohibits arbitrarily adjusting prices and delivery commitments. Sometimes similar objections will be raised when attempting to apply standards to the overhead functions. The principal arguments will most likely be that the tasks are too varied and actual performance is too difficult to measure. Strategies and counterpoints to these arguments include the following. Although there are administrative costs associated with developing, implementing, and using time standards, consider the costs of not using time standards. These costs include underestimating or overestimating jobs, allowing operators to take longer than necessary on manufacturing tasks, and having no meaningful tool for estimating new projects and measuring performance. The fear of being measured and being held accountable for one's performance or the performance of one's department should not be a factor in making a standards implementation decision. Performance measurement is inherent to running a business. People who object to this belong elsewhere. Concerns about using inaccurate standards for penalizing individuals or departments support the argument that standards should be accurate. These concerns don't support abandoning the effort. Individual performance will differ, but this argument is not a reason for avoiding standards. Differences are to be expected, but individual performance well below standard indicates an improvement opportunity. It may be that additional training, tooling improvements, reassignment to less complex tasks, or replacement is the solution. If the standards indicate that prices are too low or that quoted lead times are too short, this represents another improvement opportunity. The focus needs to be on finding ways to reduce task times and understanding true costs. The organization should not ignore what the standards reveal. If overhead functions object to having standards applied to their activities, the reasons for the objection should be examined. As mentioned earlier, the frequently quoted reason is task variability and complexity. This has the feel of elitism to it. If the tasks vary, average task times can be used. The time required to process a purchase order, review a contract, or prepare an engineering drawing may vary from task to task, but over time the averages in each category are relatively stable. The challenge to a cost reduction team wishing to implement a meaningful standards program is diplomatically responding to the previously discussed objections and persuading the people who object. Support from senior management is helpful. One last risk remains, and that is sustaining the effort. In many cases, organizations have standards, but they have fallen into disuse. Monthly senior management efficiency reviews will help prevent that. Four, measuring and using efficiency. The bottom line. Efficiency is a measure of how well an organization is meeting its time standards. It is the ratio of the standard to actual performance. Poor efficiencies reveal significant cost reduction opportunities. Organizations don't have to have sophisticated data collection or analysis techniques for collecting task times and calculating efficiencies. These tasks can be performed by work center supervisors. Efficiency trends should be tracked by operators and work centers to identify where efficiencies are improving, remaining flat, or deteriorating. Improvement efforts should be focused on areas showing no efficiency growth. Key questions. Do we measure our efficiency? Can we identify areas of low efficiency and act on those to reduce cost? Is a focus on efficiency adversely affecting product quality? Is there a system that reports efficiencies on a regular basis, or do we use this information appropriately? The Efficiency Measurement and Improvement Roadmap. Figure 4.1, Recommended Efficiency Measurement and Improvement Approach. What efficiency means. There are several definitions of efficiency. A common one is that efficiency equals output over input. There are several problems with this definition, most notably including what constitutes input and what constitutes output. Some might consider input to be the number of hours worked. Others might consider it to be how many people are employed. Still others might consider input to be how much money is spent. There are other measures too. Output is similarly ambiguous, at least from the perspective of how to reduce manufacturing costs. One measure of output might be sales, another might be amount of product shipped, another might be number of units produced, and so on. These are not bad measures. They all may have their place as benchmarks for assessing the organization's performance, but for our purposes, something more to the point is necessary. In a manufacturing environment, and in particular, when seeking to reduce costs by measuring and improving efficiency, the preferred definition of efficiency is the ratio of the time standard to the actual time required to perform a task. Efficiency equals time standard divided by actual time. The reason this metric works in a manufacturing environment is that it allows supervisors to identify where efficiency is not what it should be. It allows focusing on inefficient areas. As explained in the last chapter, there are several approaches for developing time standards, each with its unique advantages and disadvantages. As discussed, a blended approach using engineered time standards, historical performance, and simulations will provide the most accurate time standard. Collecting the actual times can be as simple as recording start and stop times for particular tasks, or as sophisticated as implementing a barcode reading system. Evaluating efficiency. Once the organization establishes standards and collects actual times, it can measure and evaluate efficiency. At the individual level, efficiency can be computed and used to assess operator performance. At the work center level, work center efficiencies can be compared to the time standards to assess work center and supervisor performance. Over time, efficiency trends can be analyzed to identify if efficiency is improving, deteriorating, or standing still. Let's consider assessing individual operator performance first. Suppose we have a situation in which an operator is required to assemble a complex subassembly, and let's further suppose that the time standard for this task is 48 minutes. Over the course of a day, the operator completes 6 subassemblies with actual times as indicated in Table 4.1. Armed with these results, the question now becomes, is this operator performing efficiently? Table 4.1, Operator Efficiency Calculations. The efficiencies shown for each subassembly are the time standard divided by the actual time. One might initially conclude that the answer is no, because in every case the operator takes longer than the time standard to complete the task, which means the operator's efficiency is below 100%. That initial conclusion might be wrong, though, for a variety of reasons. All we know at this point is that the operator is not attaining 100% efficiency. Here are some of the possibilities. The time standard could be wrong. It might underestimate how long it takes to perform the task. Management may have unintentionally made the supervisor's life more difficult by locating tools, drawings, work instructions, materials, and other things required for the job far away from the operator's workstation. If the time required to attain these items is not included in the original time standard, the operator will most likely not attain 100% efficiency. This is actually a subset of the topic listed earlier, i.e., the time standard is wrong. In investigating these factors, a good supervisor will identify and take the steps necessary to eliminate these time wasters. The work area may have other detractors that include delays, such as poor lighting, frequent need for tool adjustments, and the like. A good supervisor will identify and address these factors. The operator may not know how to do the job. If additional training or work instruction improvements are needed, the supervisor should take steps to provide it. The good news at this point is that we haven't gone very far in our quest for improving efficiency, and thereby reducing costs. And we already have a menu of things to investigate and potentially correct. They all came about by asking two simple questions. How long should the task take, and how long does the task take? Similarly, we can assess efficiency at the work center level. Suppose the work center has 5 employees assembling the same product described earlier. Their performance on a particular day might be shown as Table 4.2. These results allow us to assess and target improvements at the work center level in the same manner as we did for an individual operator. Note that Johnson is attaining higher efficiencies than anyone else is. It might make sense, based on the results shown in Table 4.2, to closely study Johnson's work methods, assuming his work is of acceptable quality, to identify how he attains such high efficiencies. If Johnson has techniques or is using tools that shorten his actual times, this information could be used for modifying the process used by the other operators. Similarly, Jones' performance is below the others. Jones may need more training or other guidance to improve his efficiency. These kinds of results shown here can also be summarized for different work centers, different steps in the process, and different products. Using these different perspectives will allow the organization to target and improve inefficient areas. Evaluating efficiency trends. In addition to assessing efficiency at a specific point in time, the organization should collect efficiency data over time to assess whether efficiency is increasing, decreasing, or remaining flat. The last two situations should not be acceptable, as will be explained later. Suppose we track weekly work center efficiency for the month of July, as shown in Table 4.3. Efficiency trend data. We can then plot the data to assess trends as shown in Figure 4.2. For the purposes of this example, we're only taking a short peek at efficiency over a 1-month period. In actual practice, organizations track efficiency over longer periods of time. The graphs and tables included in this chapter can be downloaded at manufacturingtraining.com. The chart shown in Figure 4.2 shows that the assembly work center's efficiency is improving, as is the paint preparation work center's efficiency. This is a good thing. These work centers' costs per unit are coming down. The paint work center's efficiency is deteriorating, which is a bad thing. Its costs are increasing. The supervisor should investigate why efficiency is decreasing in the paint work center and take appropriate corrective actions. Many things could be going on here. It might be that the paint preparation work center has stopped doing some tasks, which could explain the increase in their efficiency. This in turn means that the paint work center has to do the tasks that the paint preparation work center has stopped doing, which could explain why paint work center's efficiency is decreasing. On the other hand, it could be that the paint preparation area has actually improved while the paint area has lost efficiency. More analysis is required to understand the reasons underlying these trends. The good news is that these trends are visible. The organization can use this information to focus the cost reduction effort. The other work centers, for the most part, appear to have essentially flat efficiency. It is neither increasing nor decreasing. This is not good because it means that work centers are not improving. Over time, efficiency should increase and costs should come down. Management has a responsibility to make this happen. More investigation is required here to find out why the trend is flat. One might examine the graph and conclude that the assembly area's efficiency is substantially better than the other work centers. This may or may not be the case. It could be that the time standards for assembly work center are too liberal, and that those for the other areas are more aggressive. Alternatively, it could be that the standards in all areas are realistic and there actually are substantive differences in performance due to the processes, supervision, operator training, and so on. The good news is that those using these evaluation methods allows for focused cost reduction efforts. In many cases, manufacturers worry less about the absolute efficiency values and more about the trends shown in Figure 4.2. Their reasoning is that inaccurate time standards will influence the absolute efficiency values, but not the trend data, and the real interest is in efficiency improvement. In fact, some organizations do not change time standards once they have been established for this reason. They are more interested in trend data, and shifting time standards will artificially skew the trends. Although this logic has some merit, time standards should be as accurate as possible for the following reasons. Unrealistically tight time standards are demoralizing to operators and frequently result in operators dismissing the time standard concept as a useful work measurement tool. Unrealistically liberal time standards can act to reduce efficiency, as operators may reduce output based on low management expectations. Inaccurate time standards, either too high or too low, result in inaccurate cost estimation, which can result in lost business or lost profits. In our experience, and as discussed in the preceding chapter, manufacturers are best served by accurate time standards. Any minor perturbations to the efficiency trend data resulting from accurizing time standards will most likely be minor and in any event unidentifiable. Who should do this work? The question that always emerges is who should do the work related to measuring efficiency. In larger organizations, the industrial manufacturing engineers are normally assigned to standards development, and the efficiency calculations are automated. Usually the finance organization prepares and publishes the efficiency data. This makes sense for a few reasons. The first is that the finance organization is usually charged with collecting cost information, and the second is that having someone outside the manufacturing organization do the calculations assures objectivity. As discussed previously, though, the absence of an automated system or sophisticated data collection capability should not preclude gathering and using efficiency data. In smaller organizations and in the absence of any system for data collection and reduction, the manufacturing supervisors can observe and record enough information to identify and act on efficiency-related cost reduction opportunities. It's not that hard to do, and the better ones are probably already doing this. In the overhead areas where such data are typically not collected, the supervisors can similarly be charged with evaluating efficiency. As in the earlier case, good supervisors should already be doing this. Risks. Many of the same risks and risk management actions listed in the preceding chapter exist here. Although a few supervisors and managers will say it openly, those with poorly performing work centers will not want to publicize their inefficiencies. The way to address this risk is to focus on the reasons why we measure efficiency. The intent is not to punish people. The intent is to identify improvement opportunities. Some may complain that measuring efficiency requires too much effort. This criticism can be blunted by pointing out that the organization will miss cost reduction opportunities if efficiency is not measured, and that the cost of measuring efficiency is small compared to the likely return on this investment. Some may complain that the people who create the standards do not understand the work. The way to manage this is to be diligent about correcting standards when errors are found. It's also a good idea to require supervisors to identify incorrect standards in their areas. Implementing this requirement lessens the criticism because it places the responsibility for identifying incorrect standards on the supervisor. Complaining about incorrect standards then becomes an admission that incorrect standards are not being identified. In the quest for improved efficiency, product quality may suffer. The risk here is that the organization focuses only on speed and ignores quality. A good way to manage this risk is to factor quality into the efficiency calculations. One approach is to not count rejected items in the efficiency calculations and to allocate the time spent on rejected items to other completed work. This significantly reduces efficiency. It forces those being measured to focus on both efficiency and quality. Operators may resist efficiency measurement systems for the same reasons some supervisors and managers will. If they are inefficient, they won't want to broadcast it. A radical approach to managing this risk is to incentivize operators through bonuses as efficiency thresholds are met. This can work well for both efficiency and quality, especially if it is tied to quality as outlined earlier. Five, assessing machine utilization. The bottom line. Utilization is the ratio of load to capacity expressed as a percentage. Machine and personnel utilization metrics show if the organization is efficiently using its resources. Using this metric supports cost reduction by identifying areas of low utilization. Where low utilization occurs, management either should take steps to address it by shedding excess resources if the workload is low, or by correcting low utilization causes if work is available. Key questions. Do we measure utilization? What are the sources of low personnel or machine utilization? Is a focus on utilization adversely affecting efficiency? The Utilization Measurement and Improvement Roadmap. Utilization is a measure of how well an organization's labor and equipment are being used. It is the ratio of load, how much work the organization has, to capacity, how much work the machines or the workforce can do. The unit of measure for both load and capacity is typically hours, and the utilization is usually expressed as a percentage. Utilization is usually evaluated on a weekly or monthly basis. The formula is utilization equals load divided by capacity. Utilization is important from a cost perspective for two reasons. If the utilization is low, the organization is not using its available capacity. This may occur because the organization has too little work. It may occur if the organization has too much equipment or too many people. If the utilization is low because there is too much equipment or too many people, the organization can reduce costs by reducing headcount or selling the excess equipment, assuming the company can't bring in more business to fully utilize these resources. Low utilization can occur because the work is there but is not being assigned to machines and executed. If the organization's load is increasing such that the load will exceed capacity, the organization needs to know this and act on it to prevent delivery delinquencies. The organization can purchase more equipment, hire more people, work overtime, add shifts, subcontract the work, decline to accept the additional work, or modify the process to increase the capacity. Ideally, it would be great to walk into a factory and see all of the machines operating and all the people in the factory making product. In this case, all resources are being fully utilized. On the other hand, it is disconcerting to see expensive machines sitting idle or people in the factory not working. The utilization concept helps to drive the factory and its workforce away from the second situation and more towards the first one. In the process, costs decrease. Machine utilization. The machines in a factory under ideal conditions are available for as many hours as there are in a week. Each machine's capacity can be expressed as 7 days times 24 hours, or 168 hours per week. In reality, most companies work 40 hours per week on a single shift. Based on this, the capacity of each machine is 40 hours. This is further reduced by the need to maintain the machine and the setup time, the time required to make the machine ready for the next job. Most organizations allow 15% for setup time and maintenance activities. If the machine operated 100% of the time it was available, recognizing that setup and maintenance detract from its availability, it would have a utilization of 85%, as shown here. Utilization equals 40 hours times 0.85 divided by 40 hours equals 85%. Based on this formula, 85% is often an upper bound for machine utilization. Management can do things to reduce setup time and perform preventative maintenance activities outside the normal 40-hour shift to raise this above 85%. Later chapters address these topics. If the machine is not operated all the time it is available, the utilization will be correspondingly reduced. For example, if the machine operates only 24 hours during the week, the utilization would be 51%. As seen in this calculation, utilization is easy to calculate. There's no rocket science here. Work center supervisors can note machine run durations and quickly perform the calculations indicated in this formula. Utilization can then be considered from the perspective of the machine, the operator assigned to it, the work center, or the entire factory. Utilization can also be trended to determine if it is increasing, decreasing, or remaining constant over time. Assuming the work exists, measuring machine utilization is a good thing for the following reasons. It motivates supervisors to keep the machines running, i.e., making parts. Because of the machines running, it tends to reduce overtime. If a machine breaks down, it focuses attention on rapidly repairing it. It focuses supervision on using all resources. If the utilization metric has a downside, though, and that is, seeking to increase machine utilization is only relevant if the work exists and it is performed efficiently. Simply relying on a utilization metric without considering workload and efficiency can result in artificial measures to bump up utilization, such as slowing machine feed rates, putting work on the machine when it is not needed, or making more parts than required. Such actions increase costs. They should be avoided. Personnel utilization. Management can also measure human resource utilization, which is a much better approach than only considering efficiency. A person could be extremely efficient when working, but work very little between jobs. It is, in its simplest form, a quick gauge of utilization is simply counting how many people are making product versus how many are not. This is relatively easy to do. Just walk into the factory and count people and then identify how many are engaged in making product. In a more rigorous manner, supervision can collect the amount of time charged by a direct labor person to direct labor jobs and divide that by the total number of hours available. Management should already be collecting this information so that costs can be assigned to projects or products. The same data can be used for assessing personnel utilization. For example, if an operator in the factory charges 32 hours to direct charge jobs, that worker's utilization is 32 hours of direct charge labor divided by 40 hours available, which is 80%. In organizations that do not assign direct charge labor to projects or products, work center supervisors can still collect data and determine utilization. The same caveats offered earlier for machine utilization are applicable here. If management focuses too heavily on utilization without considering efficiency, operators may tend to work more slowly or inflate the amount of time they work on a job. It may not just be operators who do this. Sometimes their supervisors may direct them to do so. Improving utilization. The most obvious causes of low utilization are having too much capacity, too many people, too many machines, or both, or not enough work. If utilization is low, the organization needs to bring in more work or shed resources. Sometimes excess capacity may be a temporary condition. For example, if new work is coming in that will require capacity later. In other cases, the organization may decide to accept low utilization temporarily to retain a trained workforce or for humanitarian reasons. In many cases, though, low utilization represents a cost reduction opportunity. Poor supervision can be the culprit when low utilization occurs in specific work centers. In this case, the supervisor may need counseling tools or guidance in how to assign work to operators or machines. In some cases, the supervisor may need to be replaced. Poor process design resulting in upstream process bottlenecks can also induce low utilization in specific work centers. The upstream bottlenecks prevent work from getting to the downstream work centers, and downstream people and machines are underutilized. The organization can identify if this is occurring by examining utilization data for each work center. Sometimes this is obvious just by visiting the work centers. If successive work centers have high and low utilizations, it probably means the upstream work center is a bottleneck. Corrective actions may require process redesign or adding capacity, either people or machines, to the upstream work center. The fix may be as simple as moving people from the low utilization work center to the preceding high utilization work center, assuming the downstream work center folks have the required skills or they can be taught these skills. Machine breakdowns often induce low utilization, especially if non-operational machines remain dormant for extended periods. Machine breakdowns can result from inadequate preventive maintenance, running the machine at too high a rate, using the wrong machine for a job, erroneous CNC computer numerically controlled programs that cause machine crashes, continuing to use machines after their useful life. Corrective actions for these problems include using the machines appropriately, assuring that the CNC programs are good, and a preventative maintenance program. When machine breakdowns occur, an inability to quickly diagnose and fix the machine lowers utilization. This is a challenge in many organizations. Management's stance should be that machines need to be fixed quickly. Footnote 1. In our experience, this is the dominant cause of CNC machines not being available for use. Footnote 2. The issue here is to maintain an in-house machine repair capability or buy the services of outside repair specialists. Smaller companies generally use outside repair services, but this should not be a reason for accepting lengthy repair times. The fact is that both in-house and purchase services have significant disadvantages, including response time and cost. The best approach is a good preventative maintenance program to prevent breakdowns. Low utilization for specific individuals may point to operator-specific training or motivation issues or poor supervision. Simply letting the supervisor know the low utilization situation is visible often corrects it. Utilization is a factor in expansions. Utilization is a factor when a business is considering an expansion. If utilization is low, it doesn't make sense to hire more people or add more machines. Improving utilization is a much less expensive alternative. Whenever management considers adding more people or more equipment to increase capacity, the question should always be, have we done everything we could to improve utilization? If the answer is no, the focus should be on utilization improvements prior to considering additional staff or equipment. Who should do this work? Surprisingly, utilization is frequently not tracked in both large and small organizations. Our advice is to have the work center supervisors do it for the machines and have the finance organization do it for the people. Here's an approach that works well. Have the work center supervisors calculate utilization on each machine in their area. It's a straightforward matter to calculate what percentage of the time a machine runs during the week. 2 decimal place accuracy is not the intent. The intent is to get supervisors thinking about how to use all of their resources efficiently and to push for rapid repairs when machines go down. Simply monitoring machine utilization usually improves it. The finance organization can quickly identify by work center the ratio of direct charge hours to total hours available. This information can usually be obtained in an automated manner. The concept here is to identify where direct charge factory labor is not being effectively utilized. With this visibility, management will know where excess labor capacity exists and allow focus on improving it. Risks. Simply relying on a utilization metric without considering efficiency, quality, and other measures can increase costs. These might occur if machine rates are slowed, more parts than necessary are produced, or other artificial means are employed to bump up utilization. This can be prevented by training work center supervisors on how to use utilization along with other performance metrics, and by management evaluating utilization, efficiency, and quality simultaneously. I will leave off here. I hope you enjoyed this. This is for educational purposes only, and this is just me documenting my learning journey and reading, just like if you went to a library and you checked this book out and you read it and you wanted some help with reading it, that's why I'm here. Thank you very much.